Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Josh Grillo, co-founder here at Resident 360. And I am also joined by the digital diva, Caroline Mills, our director of digital marketing here at Resident 360. And Caroline, we have a topic that you just did a training on, correct? Geofencing.
Yes, yeah, we did. We had like a fun internal group seminar, if you call it that, and where we just kind of talked about geofencing. We did some fun scenario games together to kind of decide when it's best for a client. So we thought it would be great to talk about today.
I'm all ears and ready to dive into this. So for everybody listening, what is geofencing? Because I think there's people that heard about it. They kind of know about it. They probably think it's overly complicated, but in simple terms, what is geofencing?
That's the most common thing I hear is people know a little bit, but just not a ton about it. But essentially what geofencing is you're targeting users based on location. Now, when I say users, I mean truly anybody having some kind of mobile device on them at a time. And we can talk about how we narrow this down of who is carrying that. But you're basically drawing a virtual fence, so to speak, around a specific place. So nothing you can see with your eyes, but it is happening internally on our devices when we enter different places. And so you're serving ads to people who have been in those locations. So yes, they physically do have to visit them, but they don't see anything. They don't know it's happening. And this is all happening on your phone's geo-targeted location.
So it's not just about where someone lives. Is it kind of about where they go?
Exactly. So if someone visits a competitor property, maybe a coffee shop nearby, or even a retail center, we can serve them ads before they leave. And really, that's what makes it so powerful is we're targeting behavior, not just a demographic.
So why is it such a good strategy for multifamily properties?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got a few different ways of looking at this and different ways to use it. I always say it's very niche to every single property and what kind of market they're in, but you really have intent-based targeting. So you can put it over competitor properties so that if somebody's going in and touring and visiting that competitor property, they have very high intent to tour and lease there. There's a lot of different ways you know that. You say, okay, great, Caroline, how are you not targeting everybody who's there all the time? You have a lot of different ways when you're using geofencing of what's called really a holding period. So again, if I'm targeting, say it's my own community, and I walk into the building once, it's going to kind of hold me in that zone to decide, am I staying at this location or am I just visiting this location? So if I am going to move in and stay and visit at this location and it decides, hey, in 72 hours, this person hasn't left or this person has continued to come back to this location, it is not going to serve me ads and it is not going to try and keep, showing up on my device because it's like, okay, well, you live here. You're not visiting for something. So that's the same thing we're doing. So visiting competitor properties, somebody has very high intent. They're coming, they're leaving, they're going back home. So doing the same thing to them there. You have hyper local reach. So this is targeting people who are already in your market. And really, it expands beyond just search and social. So somebody doesn't have to be looking up your property name yet. They don't have to go to Google and type anything in for this to happen to them. They don't even have to be interested in it yet for it to happen to them. But if they visit these intent locations that you've got, they're going to get served it on their mobile device.
All right. So this is more of a top to mid-funnel strategy, would you say?
Absolutely. So geofencing lets you get in front of renters before they even start Googling, but it still supports the full channel when it's paired with other services.
All right. Well, let's talk about locations. So what should properties actually target?
I would want to sit down with every community. So before you say, oh, you need to do these things with every single property you've got, you have a very different type of demographic and market for somebody who is in like the west end of Chicago in a very high intense area. It's a very metro city area and there's different boroughs and there's all this different kind of stuff going on. Versus if you are somebody, say in Wilmington, North Carolina, a little bit slower, you're more of a beach town, you don't have skyscrapers and huge Google corporate offices and all that kind of stuff. So you're going to have very different targets, but you're going to have you're going to call them your high intense targets. So these are going to be, everyone's going to have competitors. So your competitor apartment communities and or any lease ups nearby, especially if you're a lease up. I say use that sparingly. If you are a C-class property, and you're still wanting to do so, you can absolutely still do geofencing. But if the A+ community down the street that's a lease up is not your actual competitor, so we always tell people who are your realistic competitors, not your aspirational competitors. So you don't want to just choose someone because they're new and people are going to be moving in. if that's not who's truly going to lease at your community. So choose your realistic competitors. Then you have your lifestyle targets. Okay, great. The type of people I've got living at my community. What type of coffee shops do they go to? Do they go to gyms nearby? Do they go to shopping centers? What are the things they do outside of this? And great, if they're visiting those places, I want them to live here. And then you have your employer-based targets. So again, depending on your demographic, this could be at places like hospitals. This could be corporate offices. This could be campuses. These tech campuses are a huge one that we've got in different areas. This could be university areas. So, do your research on your areas. There are different laws in different cities and states at this time on where you're able to do that. But if you're checking, within your local regulations, you can have different ways of doing this with these people.
So out of these three, you've got your high intent targets, your lifestyle targets, your employer-based targets. Is the recommendation to focus on one type or actually mix them up?
Personally, I really see the best results when it comes from layering them. So your competitors for your intent and then your lifestyles for scaling up. So you are going to capture more people in those areas until you've really narrowed down your right thing. But I always see the best between mixing up our different areas and not just relying on one.
What about budgeting? Like what type of budgets do these geofencing ads need? I mean, you're talking about ads being served on mobile devices and in locations people are at. So number one, they've got to be pretty tiny little ads, or unless they're kind of like full screen takeovers, right? Which we've seen those ads. Yeah. But what type of budgets are we talking about?
Yeah, depending on your market, we would kind of say anywhere from low end could be about $750 a month. To high end, you're kind of looking at like a Google Ads type campaign. High end, you could be sitting maybe $3,000 to $5,000, really just depending on your market. And I would say it's more dependent on how many places you want to go after. If you're only using 3 competitors and, 3 employers, maybe you don't need as much as somebody who wants 10 competitors and 7 employers. So it just kind of depends on the more people you target, either the smaller their budget's going to be, or the more budget you need to put into the entire thing. I would say I typically see most of the spend around maybe like a $1,500 mark. That's going to get you a really good mix of competitors, locations around town, different audience groups, different employer-based things, and that's just going to give you a nice good mix.
And that's basically monthly, right? These are campaigns that all run monthly. Yeah. And in your experience, are these campaigns that run for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or just as you need leads, or?
I would suggest a minimum. We never want to go less than 90 days just because of the time you're going. You still enter a learning period with these, just like anything else. So you're going to have that first 30 days to really kind of learn and go after who you're going for. I always like to say a minimum of 6 months. We really won't do less than 3, but I like to say 6 months because you may find out, okay, well, I thought those were my competitors at the time, but after you've been serving to them, those aren't the people we're seeing coming in. I'm seeing people and we can actually see that too. We can tell you who's visited what locations and if they're coming back to tour your community. And I tell you, hey, who you tell me your top 3 competitors are, nobody's come to tour you from them. But these other 3 that we tested out, a lot of people are coming from that side. And you say, oh, well, that's a new neighborhood area. Maybe it's because the new shopping center was built there. Now we can really kind of adjust and retarget that. Whereas if you have it for too short of amount of time, you just don't have that time. And with this being kind of that top to mid funnel, you have to give people the time to see your ads and then want to inquire, want to tour, want to go through that process with you.
Well, what does a good geofencing campaign look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I really we have different types of ads we use, and this can just depend on, what you're trying to go after. But we have kind of our square campaigns, and you'll notice after I'm telling you these, you will start going into locations around town and realize you are also getting these on your phone when you're searching different places. But you have what's kind of like your square widget that you may see like scrolling through different things online, on news articles, whatever it may be. And then you have what's called a banner widget. Those are those long, skinny ones. You see them at the top or the bottom of your screen when you're looking through something. We want to make sure these are colorful, these are branded, these are eye-catching. We always want to include a real photo of the community, maybe a rendering at the time, but a real photo of the community when we can. So having that strong creative. You want to make sure you have clear messaging. Remember that these are going to be on people's mobile devices. So writing out your entire romance paragraph just isn't going to work. So you want something like call today, studio through 3 bedrooms, and then it's got a beautiful photo. Fantastic. I know what you offer. I know what to do, and you've got a photo there of it. You want to make sure that your landing page is aligned, that it actually is truly clicking over to your website, that people have somewhere to go when they see these. You want to make sure that they're frequently and consistently serving everywhere. So that comes into that budget time frame, making sure you've got the right budgets allocated. And then you always want to make sure that you're just setting realistic expectations. So this isn't really a last click conversion channel like we talked about. This is that high to mid funnel. So really just making sure we understand where it's aligning in our process with our other services and how we track how successful these are with our tours and our walk-ins and everything else we're seeing.
What would you say is a common mistake that you see?
I would say the most is like definitely with any kind of service is expecting those instant leases and then not pairing this with any kind of search campaigns, retargeting campaigns, or just having really weak, poor creative. Imagine if you're scrolling on something, is that going to catch your eye and stop you in your tracks and want you to click on it? Or you're going to be like, oh, another ad, and you're just going to keep scrolling.
Stop the scroll. Stop the scroll.
Yes, yeah.
All right. So where does geofencing kind of fit in the overall marketing strategy for a property?
It's a good question and one we often get a lot, especially in lease ups when they're just now launching everything. It's very easy when you have all your other sources ready to say, okay, well, I need a little extra push. Let me add something. But you really have your top of the funnel. So that's going to be your awareness. Remember, these are people who don't have to Google you yet to come across these. And then you have your mid funnel, your consideration. Okay, let's retarget them or let's kind of see when they're touring these competitors. So this part really supports your paid search, any kind of retargeting efforts, as well as, we'll go back to last week's episode, our email follow-ups. So geofencing really fills the gap between I've never heard of you and I'm actively searching for somewhere to live.
All right, so let's talk about success. So how do we measure success when it comes to geofencing?
That's always a big one I always like to go through. So whenever you start a new campaign with my team personally, we will go through and kind of read out reports to you because a lot of people are familiar with Google Ads now. They kind of know what metrics and numbers they're looking for and what they deem as successful. It's going to look very different on geofencing. The good news is it's very cheap to get these out on a lot of devices. So you're going to see a crazy amount of impressions on geofencing that you would over Google Ads. On Google Ads, where you might see 2,000 impressions, meaning you showed up 2,000 times. On geofencing, you may show up 30,000 times. And you're like, well, that's great. But then you see the clicks and you may say, well, I only got, 1,000 clicks. Yeah, but your click-through rate is just not the same. We're not expecting a 7% click-through rate like we do on Google Ads because remember, these people aren't searching for us. Google Ads, I'm targeting people by the keywords that they're searching. Geofencing, I'm targeting people walking into places. So our click-through rate, what we expect over there is more like a 0.25 to a 0.50%, which seems really small, but you have to remember this is retargeting and it's getting on thousands and thousands of devices daily. So still having 1,000 people click from that, that's a good click-through rate. So it really is realigning those expectations with people. What is a good impression rate for the amount of spend they have? How many people are clicking on it that makes that click-through rate? If we're dropping below 0.25, okay, something's going on there, the creative, the messaging, we're not targeting the right people. That kind of gives us those red flags. But your cost per click is going to be very, very cheap on these. And then I would say it's not within every geofencing's capability. Ours, we do measure tours. So we measure if somebody sees the ad on their device, and then they walk into your leasing office. So we actually put a geo-targeted location right around your own building. Now we're able to tell you, okay, 42 people that have come in the last month received this on their device and they came to tour. Maybe they also found you on Google Ads. Maybe they also found you in the paid, social funnel, but that's where this really feeds into it. So we kind of want to look at it as assisted conversions, really giving us that lift in branded search and then just increasing traffic from these targeted areas. So it's not really about being one click or the last click, but it's really about the influence and working in partnership with these other services.
So if a property wants to start using geofencing to improve their current marketing strategy, what should they do?
Absolutely. So if you were getting started today, you definitely want to start with your competitor targeting, truly see who is your best and most successful competitor with you. Invest in some better creative, make sure your ads are aligning with a really strong landing page. We talk all the time about digital curb appeal and that strong landing page. We've got plenty of episodes on that one. And then you really want to pair it with retargeting and search.
So this sounds like one of those strategies that starts out sounding complex, but kind of when you break it down, it's really about being in the right place at the right time. So
Absolutely.
Any final thoughts on that, Caroline?
Yeah, we want to really push home that geofencing works best when it's part of a bigger strategy and not a standalone, but it truly is incredibly powerful when you use it correctly and in conjunction with these other services.
Awesome. Good insight. As always, I think we will wrap it up right there. And I want to appreciate everybody and thank you for listening to the show today. We will be back next week with another episode of the Multifamily Marketers Podcast. Please, if you found this episode helpful, please share it with your friends, your on-site teams, like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff to help us grow the show. We will see you next time. And Caroline, thanks again. As always, you've been fantastic.
Thank you, guys. Bye.